Today is November 10th. It's 1 o'clock Eastern time, and this is our writing, reasoning, and rhetoric class. And as I promised today, I'm going to give an example of a presentation of a response in a scholastic dispute. So I've prepared a response using the template that I shared with everybody 2 weeks ago. So I'll show you, you'll get to see what it all looks like when it's all completed and filled out and everything's prepared. And I'll go through it to give you an example of what it's like to go through it. Now, the actual presentation isn't polished or anything like that. I got to work on this today at 12:08. So I prepared this document over the last hour as I sat here getting ready. It's not like I worked on this for 3 weeks, but the arguments and things like that, I'm already familiar with just because I've done this in the past. But the actual preparation of this presentation, I only spent an hour, and I can prove that. I'll show you the timestamp on it. But it doesn't take long when you develop the arguments and understand the different views and stuff like that. So you get to just relax today and see an example of what a response looks like. And then hopefully in the future, some of you guys will take up a controversial question and prepare one of these. And when you do that, let me know, and I'll check it out for you just to make sure it looks decent. And as long as everything looks good, I'll basically give you the microphone 1 week and let you present your whole response to the question. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is share my screen. All right, let me just kind of get this ready here. Actually, not yet. Let me say a couple things before I start. The goal of this, like I said, is not for us to argue, because to have a bunch of ignorant people arguing is not disputation. To have a bunch of people who don't know how to argue is, an exercise in futility. That's not what this is about. We're used to that kind of stuff because of modern democratic society, where everybody thinks because they get a vote, they're somehow like Solomon, who have the right opinions on every issue, that there's no issue that anyone can't comment on. But what's allowed by democracy isn't necessarily true in reality. And one of the things that you have to learn to become wise is you've got to learn that discussion really takes a lot of preparation. It's very difficult work to discuss anything intelligently. It takes a lot of private study, a lot of private thinking, writing things out, drafting arguments, scratching arguments, fixing them, getting into discussions with other people, learning from those discussions, constantly going back and forth and exercising yourself. Like I said, the first week of class, reason is like a muscle. You have to develop it, just like developing muscles physically. So it takes time. Now, as far as the standard goes, this is what takes time getting used to. And I'd like if you stop chatting, because you're just going to distract people. The standard is that you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to assert anything that isn't either self-evident or that you can provide evidence for. So you're not allowed to share an opinion. You're not allowed to make a statement that someone else said. If you do refer to someone else, if you say like such and such said this, it would have to be an authority that everyone trusts and knows is true. So it doesn't make any sense to say, oh, you know what? You know why I wear Nike shoes? Because Michael Jordan. Who cares, what kind of shoes somebody else wears? That doesn't matter. That's not an argument. That's advertising. That's not reasoning. That's advertising. Okay. And so you've got to learn, you've got to get this stuff out of your head. We're not advertising products or ideas here. We're actually trying to prove things. So what you're used to with advertising, advertising works because advertising is made for an audience of dumb people who are moved by all kinds of unreasonable motives. That's what advertising is for. When you begin to live according to reason, that stuff doesn't work anymore because you know better. You don't think like that. You're not influenced by those silly ideas, So the thing you're going to have to get used to is the standard. You're not going to be allowed to say anything that you can't prove. And you can't imagine that I will ever be, impressed or moved by anything that you can't prove. I don't care what your opinion is. I don't care if all of you agree on the same opinion. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You know, you have to prove what you say. And what I hope, what I really hope as students, if there's one thing I want you to learn from me as a teacher, I want you to learn to be comfortable in discussion. I want you to learn to be comfortable listening to what people have to say, but only paying attention to things that are reasonable and not getting upset, keeping calm, focusing on reasons, proving things that people say are not certain, and so on. If you learn that, you're going to have a lot of fun in your studies. If you don't learn that, you're just going to be an emotional, crazy person that's always upset, you know, always struggling, always miserable. And I don't want you to be like that. I want you to be happy in democratic society where you're surrounded by hundreds of millions of crazy people, and you can live in the midst of it all with perfect peace. You know, that's the goal. Okay. And I'll tell you this, great colleges and universities, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for students who can sit in a classroom surrounded by people who disagree with them and have a happy discussion of a controversial issue without, you know, blowing themselves up or pulling out guns and killing people and stuff like that. So colleges, businesses, every institution that exists is looking for people who can operate in democratic society where there are a lot of different ideas, a lot of different practices and religions, and be calm and discuss things, find solutions, get along with other people, and so on. So that's one thing that I think I'm good at in life, is I'm able to stay calm and enjoy controversial discussions. But it's because of this reasoning method. It's not anything in me. It's just because of the method of reasoning. So that's what I would like you to get used to. Okay. So having said all that, I'll share what I want to share. This is the same exact document that I gave you all last week. All right. I didn't, you know, there's no secret tricks that I keep reserved for myself or anything like that. It's the same exact document that I gave you. Okay. And so what we'll do is we'll just walk through it together. Now, just to prove to you that I prepared this today, I'll show you the details for this document. The document was created at 12:08 p.m. All right, it's 1:13. So this document was created an hour ago, and I filled it out in just a few minutes. So once you get used to this, it's very easy. All right, it's very easy to do this. You'll start to get used to thinking like this, and you'll be able to respond to questions by doing this automatically. All right. So what I've got here at the start, and this is the same exact document that I shared with you guys last week. Okay. Joshua, that would be a suspicion. That'd be a false accusation with no evidence, right? So already you're in trouble. You've made a false accusation. That's the sin of suspicion. And the burden of proof would be on you to prove that I actually copied something. All right. So as I said, you'll see that you're not used to the standards and you're going to get yourselves in trouble. All right, so same document you have. I want to show you how to use it, and hopefully you guys can get good at this and in the future prepare them. Now, another thing I want to say, when you get into public speaking and stuff like that, everybody talks about being nervous. The reason why they're nervous is because they don't know what to say and they're not sure if they're right. So people are always nervous when they argue because they're afraid that someone's going to raise an objection or raise some other argument that blows up their whole position. That's what they're afraid of. The way to get around, or the way to get over that lack of confidence in speaking is to do all of that work beforehand. So when you step in front of a group of people to talk, you already know what might come. You already know what the best arguments are going to be. You already know what the most dangerous arguments are going to be, and you have time to prepare for them. So you can prepare, and that's where confidence comes from. It doesn't just, you don't just act like you're confident, like that's crazy. That's crazy stuff. You don't just act confident. You have to actually be confident by preparing. That's where confidence comes from, okay? So this is the same document you have, and I want to walk you through how to use it. Now, there's one other thing I should do real quick. Let me turn this off just for 1 second. I have to find one other document for you. 1 second. I have to get one more thing, because there is some more to this that I have to get. 1 second. I should have prepared this, but I forgot. Okay. All right, so I got that. Let me share my screen again, and then we'll get started. So get ready. Here we go. All right, so everything the same as what I gave you, but this is me using it. All right, so here's the question: whether Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice. And I intentionally choose this question. I always have chosen this question because I always know that everyone thinks that they know about health. And so when I say this, they're going to think it's like a joke. It's silly, right? And they all get cocky, and they all think that they're going to easily win this argument and all this. And I do it on purpose because I know they really have no idea what they're going to talk about. They're going to assume things and make statements they have no proof for. And I do it on purpose to show that, okay? Socrates taught that the worst disease that you can ever have is to think that you know things that you don't actually know. That's the worst mental condition to be in, to think that you know things that you don't actually know. That's really what it means to be crazy, to think that you know things that you don't actually know. And it's the problem with ignorance. Ignorant people, when you combine ignorance and arrogance, you get people who think they know things that they don't actually know. And Socrates' dialogues, which I strongly encourage you to read, the dialogues that Plato wrote where Socrates argues with people, the whole point of those dialogues is to show you how people think they know things, but the things that they think they know, they don't actually know. And Socrates always proves this to people, okay? So that's what we have to be careful of. You have to be very careful that you don't think that you know something that you don't actually know. And the way to be safe from that is to just start discussions, start investigations of questions like this by just assuming that you know nothing, right? That's why Socrates said, I'm the wisest man in the world because I'm the only man who knows that I know nothing, right? That's what Socrates meant when he said he was the wisest man in the world. Because when he enters into a discussion or takes up a question or a topic, the first step is to assume that he knows nothing, okay? And start from scratch and then build every single point with evidence so that you can construct a whole body of knowledge that you're totally certain is true. Now, for those of you studying classical geometry, I don't know how many of you are in classical geometry, and I don't mean modern geometry or any of that stuff. I'm talking classical geometry. In classical geometry, you start with the elements. You learn definitions, you learn axioms, and you learn postulates. And you are not allowed to say one thing that you can't prove comes from those elements. That's the point of geometry, all right? To build knowledge of geometry that's absolutely certain. And what we do in geometry is a good example of what we need to do in every subject, okay? So that's the challenge. All right, to get started here. The question is whether Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice. Now I've got to explain the significance of this question. In modern society, follow me here. Chill out with the chat. Follow me here because you need to get all the details, all right? In modern society, which is where we live, so it doesn't matter if something was true 500 years ago or is true 400 years in the future. It doesn't matter. What we live right now, in modern society where we live, food is available in great abundance. Health risks come not from the lack of food, but from excess of food. Health risks come from the lack of food, not from the lack of food, but from excess of food. Learning to eat to avoid excess calories or unnatural levels of natural substances is necessary to avoid modern health risks. So you could talk about, malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies. Those really are not problems in modern society. It doesn't matter what was true in medieval Europe. They had their own problems, their own issues. In modern society, we tend to not have those problems. We have the opposite problems. We eat too much. And so when we look at the health risks, what are considered the greatest health risks in our society, in our generation, they're not caused by deficiencies, they're caused by excesses, okay? So that's the problem that we have to face. We have to learn how to eat to avoid excesses so that we can avoid the great health risks of our time. And in light of that, my thesis with respect to this question, my thesis is that Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice. Now, I'm going to prove this, of course. It's not my opinion. It's a thesis that I plan to prove. Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice. All right. Now, the first challenge that you have when you prepare a response is you've got to think of opposing ideas. All right. So now I've been doing this this discussion with students probably since 2006. So I always get the same objections. I know what they are. I know what's coming. And I can probably summarize them. First of all, the first argument that's raised against me is that fruit is healthy and something like diet soda is not healthy, but fruit is healthy. And therefore, a drink that, comes from fruit must be healthier than a drink that comes from who knows where, right? So the first argument is fruit is healthy. So orange juice is fruit. Fruit is healthy, therefore, orange juice must be healthier. Diet soda is not fruit. So diet soda can't be healthy. So that's argument number one. Second, people come up with chemical arguments like Diet Coke has aspartame in it, right? So there's this chemical that's used to sweeten Diet Coke. It's not sugar. It's an artificial sweetener called aspartame. I think some people might pronounce that aspartame. I don't know. But anyway, it's got this substance in it called aspartame or aspartame, and it's an artificial sweetener, and therefore it's bad, right? So it's artificial. Some people will say it causes health problems. Maybe it causes cancer and so on. Well, you know what? We'll see about that, right? Because we have to prove that. So some people say this substance is dangerous. Next, another argument, Diet Coke has lots of caffeine. Caffeine is not good for you, causes all these problems. Orange juice doesn't have any caffeine in it. Diet Coke has caffeine. So, if you have to choose between one or the other, orange juice is healthier. It has no caffeine, okay? Next, Diet Coke is acidic. Diet Coke is acidic. I once had a student argue that someone did a video where they showed that if you pour soda or diet soda on the hood of a car and leave it, it could eat through the paint of the car, right? And it was this demonstration to show how dangerous diet soda is because it can eat through the hood of the paint, not the, let me correct that. It did not eat through the hood of the car. It ate through the paint on the hood of the car. So not that bad, okay? Yeah. So it's acidic and it can damage things, okay? So who would want to drink something that was acidic, like pour acid down your throat? That sounds like some kind of suicide or punishment, okay? All right. So Diet Coke is acidic. And then lastly, another argument that always comes up, Diet Coke is not natural, right? Diet Coke is not natural, and therefore things that are not natural are not healthy. If we want to eat healthy, what should we eat? We should eat natural foods, right? Natural foods, that's healthy. Diet Coke is not natural, so Diet Coke is not healthy. So let me ask you this. We'll take a minute for some feedback here. Would you agree that most of those are the kinds of arguments that you were considering raising against the thesis that Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice? All right, so here's what I'd like you to do. And this is going to be very brief. You have to be brief, okay? So listen, you have to be very brief. You can't now write your own response. I'm just going to delete it if you start doing that. So what I'm asking here is, and you can see how I've written these opinions very briefly, right? If you can post a very brief statement of another objection you can do it right now. If you start rambling, I'm just going to delete it because this is my response, okay? So if there's anything else, Diet Coke is addicting, I think. Okay, so I got two arguments for addictions. Diet Coke leads to weight gain. Okay, any others? Now realize, let me just holding on 1 second, realize that you would have to prove these things, right? So when you say that, you know, my heart rate doesn't increase. You could say diet soda causes you to explode, you know, like I'm going to wait. You're going to have to prove that. And I'm going to be able to respond and disprove that. So think Diet Coke has no nutritional value. Okay. Thanks, Abigail. So we got a couple, right? Any others real quick before we move on? We got a couple additional objections. All right. We've got addicting, repeat. We got three statements that it's addicting. One of them, Diet Coke provokes the need for sugar. Okay, there's another one, another objection. Diet Coke leads to weight gain. Diet Coke leads to addictions. All right, so we have a couple. Diet Coke, Sarah says, Diet Coke can reduce calcium in the bones. All right, let's stop there, okay? So that's good. Yeah, you have a few more objections that you would want to raise, okay? But as we get, and here's another thing. You can raise an objection that at the moment you don't have the ability to prove, okay? You can raise an objection that you think is true or that you've heard or something like that, that you don't have the ability to prove at the moment. But what we would do in that event is we would just ignore you until you had the evidence, okay? So if you wanted to raise an objection but didn't have the evidence ready, you could like, you know, write that on the board as it were, but we're not going to consider it because you don't have any evidence ready. So, but that's okay, okay? Likewise, you may raise an objection and you may have some evidence that, you know, you took it from a report from scientists or from something else. And the person who is responding doesn't have to respond to that immediately. Okay, so you could bring something up. You could bring something up like you could say the people who originally invented diet soda were terrorists, right? And they intended for diet soda to poison the American population and kill us. It was a military operation. You could raise that point and you could find, you could present evidence to support that. If I'm not capable of responding to that immediately, like I just don't even know if what you say is true, I would want to go and check that out myself. You have to give people the opportunity to check things out that are said and come back and respond to them at a later time, okay? So when you respond, when you do what I'm doing here, when you respond, there are going to be objections raised to things you say that you're just not ready to respond to. You'd have to go and research them or check them out or require the person to prove them and so on. So just get used to that, okay? When someone presents an argument that another person can't immediately respond to, that doesn't mean that they lost. It just means they need time. They may have lost. That argument may cause them to lose, but they have time. They have time to check it out, to research it themselves and get back, okay? But those are good. We got like 3 more objections, okay? Diet Coke can be addicting. Diet Coke can lead to weight gain. And the other one was Diet Coke. I'm sorry. This is another reason why you shouldn't be chatting unnecessarily, because we get all this nonsense stuff in here. Diet Coke can reduce calcium in the bones. Okay, so we've got a couple additional objections beyond those that I've come up with beforehand. All right, now for my actual demonstration. Okay, so once you list the objections, and personally, I'm not intimidated in any way by any of the objections you added because I don't think you can prove any of them. So just to tell you that up front, all right? If you raise those objections, I am very confident that you will not be able to prove those things to be true, okay? So just keep that in mind. But once I've thought through the objections, hopefully come up with the objections myself, so I have time to check them out and look for the best evidence and the best arguments and prepare my responses, then it's time for me to present my positive arguments. There's no rule for how many I need to come up with, because I could come up with just one that destroys the opposition, okay? And that's what I'm going to do here in this presentation. I have one positive argument, and it's the only argument that I'm going to present positively, okay? Just one argument. And here it is, and it's in the form of a syllogism. So I'm going to appeal to reasoning. I'm going to appeal to reasoning. So now you, as the audience, as the objectors, what you want to look at is this argument, okay? You want to look at this argument, and you've got two questions to ask. There are two things that you're looking for, two things that actually matter. If you know what a syllogism is, it's an argument made of three statements where if the first two statements are true, then the third statement must be true, okay? Three statements. If the first two statements are true, then the third sentence must be true. Now, here's what you're looking for, and pay attention to this. The first thing that you're looking for is you're looking to see if each of these premises is in fact true, okay? So that's the first thing, because the premises have to be true for the conclusion to be true. So the first thing you're looking for when someone gives you a premise is you're asking yourself, is that premise actually true? Okay? So you've got two premises that I'm presenting as truths. Okay? Now you've got to assume that I'm going to share evidence, because I do have evidence to support these. Okay? The second thing that you should be looking for is, after you've checked out the truth of these two premises, you've got to ask, does this conclusion necessarily come from these two premises? Okay? That's what it means to be reasonable. That's what it means to be conclusive or valid, all right? So we're checking the truth of the premises, and I'm going to write this for your sake. This is what you should actually be paying attention to. All right? The truth of the premises and the validity of the conclusion. So when you raise an objection, you shouldn't just be coming up with some other idea, which is what most people will do. They'll say, yeah, but what about in China, kids died of that? No, that's not disputation, because we can go on forever like that. None of the information is proven. None of it can be checked out or researched. It's just all of this crazy random information people have in their heads, right? You're looking at very specific things when you get in a discussion like this. And this is a perfect example. Are the premises true? Thanks. Thank you, Gianna. Are the premises true? And is the conclusion valid? All right. That's the voice that I have in my head for crazy people, just so you know. Okay. All right. So those are the two things you're asking for. All right. The first premise is this: that which prevents greater health risks is healthier than something else. And I present that as a premise that's self-evident, okay? If there are two things and one of them prevents greater health risks than the other, that which prevents greater health risks is healthier, okay? I argue that that's a self-evident truth. That which prevents greater health risks is healthier than something else, okay? That's my first premise. Secondly, my second premise is that Diet Coke prevents greater health risks. Now, this is not self-evident. I'm not presenting this as being self-evident. I'm going to provide evidence to prove this. So I have to prove the truth of my premises. I'm going to argue that Diet Coke prevents greater health risks than orange juice. And in light of those two premises, my conclusion and my thesis is that Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice, okay? Now, I would argue that this argument is in fact valid. Okay, that conclusion does follow from those two premises. So the whole question here, and this is what ultimately happens when you have a discussion with someone who's good at reasoning. Their arguments are usually going to be valid. The question is going to be whether their premises are true. That's the real question, okay? So the first premise is that which prevents the greater health risks is healthier, and Diet Coke prevents greater health risks than orange juice. Therefore, Diet Coke is healthier. All right. And I can, if you doubted the first statement, I could use an illustration, right? I could say, for example, let's say we've got two things in the house. We've got a fire extinguisher, right? And then we've got some like toenail fungus medicine. All right. So we've got some medicine to kill toenail fungus in the house. And we've got a fire extinguisher, right? Which of those two things is healthier for our lives, right? If the house is on fire and everyone is in danger of dying, the fire extinguisher can save our life. If we don't have a fire extinguisher, we could all die. If there's no toenail fungus medicine, we might have to suffer, or at least one of the members of the family might have to deal with some toenail fungus, but everybody's going to be okay. All right. So if we were going to say which is healthier, which promotes human health to a greater degree, a fire extinguisher in the case of fire, or toenail fungus medicine, right? We would say that the fire extinguisher is healthier than toenail fungus medicine. Okay. So that would be an example. Now pay attention here, because this is serious. I'm using an example that's intentionally, ridiculous, because I want to highlight a point. Okay. A self-evident truth that some people may doubt, right? Usually just because they're being difficult. They're not willing to grant it because they know the consequences of granting it. So in their own head, they know it's true, but they're going to pretend to object to it, right? A good response to someone who does that is to use an illustration that makes it ridiculous, all right? Which will require them then to deny something that's so obvious. Like they would literally prefer the toenail fungus medicine over the fire extinguisher, right? And so it just proves the person is either ridiculous or is not sincere. So an illustration can reduce someone's argument to absurdity, all right? That's one method of responding. So an illustration can draw out the truth of a self-evident premise, okay? So I can use an illustration just to highlight that. All right. That which prevents the greater health risk is healthier. Diet Coke prevents greater health risks. Therefore, Diet Coke is healthier, okay? Any questions at this point, or are you all with me okay? Any questions at this point? We've got some contradictions to my thesis statement. We've got my positive argument here, and I'm only presenting one for the sake of time, okay? You have to look at that argument and ask, first of all, is it a valid argument? And if you don't know the art of reasoning, you have no clue, right? You're just going to sit there and ask yourself whether it feels good, which is the problem. So having knowledge of the art of reasoning allows you to analyze that argument and figure out whether it's actually valid. That's why you need to study reasoning. And secondly, are those two premises true? Now, when we get into the question of premises, you see that your knowledge of different subjects, different fields, your ability to research different areas of learning ultimately tests what you can prove or disprove. So your education, when you say, why do I need a general education? Why do I need to learn these general arts and these general sciences? This is why. Because you have to be able to check the truth of statements that are made, and they could come from any direction, okay? They could come from any direction. Follow me here. The statements could come from any subject. I could have mathematical arguments. I could have scientific arguments. I could have historical arguments. I could have philosophical arguments. I could have biblical arguments. So your ability to hear those premises and evaluate them and determine if they're true or false is ultimately what's going to determine whether you can respond or refute an argument or not. Okay, so these debates, these disputations, why they're so good for education is because they show you that if you like to study history but you don't study science, you're in trouble. If you like to study math but you don't study theology, you're in trouble, because you're not going to be able to evaluate the truth of things that people say and present as premises for arguments that they make. Okay, now you might not be certain, right? One of you may come up with some argument from nutrition or something like that, and obviously I don't have a PhD in nutrition, right? I'm a classicist. Just hold on here, Ava, just wait for me here. Okay, I'm not a professional chemist, but I have a general knowledge of chemistry that's enough for me to discern where there might be something said that's false, and I'll know to look for it. It's just like using a calculator. If you have no knowledge of math at all, you can get into all kinds of trouble with a calculator, because you can put a decimal point in the wrong spot or hit a number twice and come up with a solution, and you've got no clue if the answer is right or not. Where if you've got a general knowledge of math and you're using a calculator, you can enter some numbers and say, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. You have a discernment that something might be wrong based on general knowledge, okay? We can always dig into it after that, but we have to have enough knowledge to have that general discernment that something might not be true, okay? So it tests your education, and it challenges you that if you want to be a person who debates and argues and fights for the truth, you've got to have a complete education. You can't just pick a major and focus all your, that's good for business, but that's not good for arguing and reasoning, okay? So anyway, let's get into this now. Two statements, the first self-evident, the second one I have to prove, and I'm willing to prove it, okay? So let's get into it. I've got an explanation written down here. Okay. The greatest health risk in our society, as I mentioned in the opening paragraph, the greatest health risks in our society include heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, all right? The greatest health risks in our society include heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. Now, that's not just my opinion. I have evidence for everything that I'm going to say, okay? The Center for Disease Control in the US government, which we consider to be, the place where, science and government sort of come together for public safety. They publish statistics and show us what the leading causes of death are in society. And so we've got a list of stuff here, right? Leading causes of death: heart disease, cancer, COVID, accidents, stroke, respiratory diseases, diabetes, and so on. So we've got these leading causes of death, okay? Follow me here. Leading causes of death. So let's look at the first one, heart disease, by far the greatest cause of death, right? Heart disease. Well, what causes heart disease? You don't just get heart disease. You don't just wake up one day and say, oh my, I've got heart disease, right? That's not how it works. What causes heart disease? Well, Center of Disease Control, and I've got footnotes here that have links to all this information I'm sharing. High blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, obesity, unhealthy diet, and so on, okay? These are causes of heart disease. So the highest risks and causes of death in our society, number one by far, heart disease. Causes of heart disease: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, and obesity, okay? Now, as we go through many of these high-risk problems, starting with the highest risk of all, when we go through them, we find that obesity is a common cause of these high-risk diseases, even COVID. Now, I don't have this information with me right now because I wasn't preparing to say this, but even COVID, if you go back to the COVID deaths that were reported and things like that, it was shown at the time that most of the people who were dying from COVID had other pre-existing conditions, the most prominent of which was obesity, that led to them, ultimately dying because of COVID. All right. Many people were able to recover. Some people weren't able to recover. Most of those who didn't recover, they had underlying problems beforehand that COVID then overwhelmed. All right. So that's the first cause and the third cause. We also saw other things like smoking, and we're not talking, obviously you have to smoke, right, to get cancer from smoking. So we're not talking about that. But heart disease with causes that include, like I said, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, unhealthy diet. These are the causes of the number one risk of death in modern society. We're not dying from starvation. We're not dying from rickets because we have no vitamin D. We're not dying of scurvy because we have no vitamin C. We're dying from problems that are caused by excessive eating, by obesity, by physical inactivity, and so on, okay? Even if we get into diabetes, we can look at an article like this that talks about who is at risk of diabetes. And guess what? Obesity is one of the primary issues that causes people to be in danger of suffering the effects of diabetes. You can have diabetes and control it, but when diabetes destroys someone's body, the causes of that, number one among them is unhealthy diet, obesity, lack of exercise, same things, okay? So when we look at the greatest risks to our health, we see that the things at the top of this list, and there's more in here. Diabetes itself is actually one of the causes. Chronic liver disease and cirrhosis is primarily caused by alcoholism and drinking too much alcohol. Alzheimer's disease is a mental disease. COVID, as I said, doesn't necessarily kill healthy people, usually kills people with other problems. Heart disease, one of the principal causes, or two of the principal causes, are related to obesity. All right. Now, my argument there is that in our society, in modern society, one of the highest risks of disease and death is obesity, right? We can't deny that. It's obesity. It causes all kinds of problems, okay? So if obesity is one of the principal health risks that underlies a number of the greatest health risks, then whatever prevents or saves someone from obesity becomes one of the most healthy influences in his or her life. So for example, there could, like I said, toenail fungus medicine, right? No question, it promotes health, right? But we're not suffering as a nation from an epidemic of toenail fungus. That's not a threat to our health and happiness as a society. What actually threatens our society's health, is obesity, is overeating. Okay, so that's the issue. Now, when we look at Diet Coke and orange juice, and we think that obesity is one of the principal causes of disease or the loss of health in modern society, and obesity is caused by consuming more calories than our bodies consume and doing that over an extended period of time, something that prevents or in no way contributes to obesity is healthier for us than something that actually is identified as a cause or a risk of promoting obesity, which is sweet fruit drinks. Okay, so high calorie fruit drinks contribute more to obesity than a 0 calorie soda could do, right? So just considering calories alone and their effect on obesity, just considering obesity as a principal health problem in our society, the danger of excessive calorie consumption, just in light of that, Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice, okay? So that's the basis of my argument there. The basis of my argument is because obesity is such a prominent health risk in modern society, related to the greatest causes of death in modern society, that which prevents obesity is healthier than something that contributes to obesity. Diet Coke does not contribute to obesity, and I'm going to argue that. I'll argue that in a minute. Orange juice does contribute to obesity. okay? So this second statement here, on which my whole argument rests, right? My whole argument rests on this second statement. Diet Coke prevents greater health risks. I've shown you that the greatest health risks are heart disease, diabetes listed among them, and then some other things that really are not caused by food and drink, like problems caused by smoking, mental health issues. Those are not caused by eating. Physical diseases that cause death, the highest risks, the most risky in modern society, are related in many ways to obesity. Diet Coke prevents obesity. It's impossible that it could ever cause obesity. It has 0 calories in it. It has as many calories as water. Whereas orange juice actually has 100 calories for every 8 ounces. And for most of you, when you do drink orange juice, I doubt that you limit yourself to 8 ounces, because that's like 1 small glass. When I was a kid, orange juice meant like a gallon of orange juice, because it's delicious. So anyway, so the second premise here, which is what you need to focus on, right? Don't get distracted. Don't get distracted. Focus on the second premise. I argue in the second premise that Diet Coke prevents greater health risks than orange juice. Okay. Now you can say something like, well, orange juice prevents what? Scurvy, right? Like lack of vitamin C saves us all from, I don't know anyone suffering from scurvy in modern society. It wasn't on the list. So for all of this talk about vitamin C, I don't really know what problem you're saving yourself from, because we don't have that problem. And there's 1,000 other ways to get vitamin C. So the health risks that orange juice would be protecting us from are in no way as serious in modern society as the health risks that drinking Diet Coke instead of orange juice could help you from, okay? So that's my argument. Don't distract on chat. Follow me here. The first premise of my argument is presented as self-evident, okay? The second premise of my argument, I've argued by showing what the greatest health risks are and how they're related to obesity, and how Diet Coke and orange juice relate to the cause of obesity and indirectly to the greater health risks, okay? And therefore, based on that, I argue that Diet Coke is healthier, okay? So that's my positive argument for Diet Coke to be considered healthier than orange juice, all right? And again, when people start saying orange juice is healthy for what, right? Healthy for what? To prevent scurvy. Scurvy was a disease that was a problem like on ships in the 15th century, right? We don't have problem with scurvy in 21st century America. So I don't even know what anyone's talking about. Plus, what you get from orange juice, you can get from other sources. You get from a vitamin. It's not that important, okay? The problem with orange juice is that it's high calorie in a society where people tend to overeat and overconsume, contributes to obesity, and can cause the highest risks of death in our society, okay? Therefore, my argument, my conclusion is that Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice, okay? I'm not saying Diet Coke is the healthiest thing in the world. I'm not saying you should go drink Diet Coke. That's not the question. The question is whether it's healthier than orange juice. And my argument is that it is. It's healthier than orange juice. If you've got to pick one, pick a Diet Coke or orange juice. You've got to pick one, and you want to know which one is healthier for me, and you live in 21st century America or England or Australia, wherever you might be. There's no way that you could argue in present modern society with the CDC telling you the highest risks in your life are going to be things like diabetes and heart disease and things like that. You can't make an argument that it's healthier for you to drink that orange juice than the Diet Coke. That's my argument, okay? So that would be my positive argument. Now it's time to respond to the objections, okay? So I've got all of my responses to the objections prepared. And let me tell you this, I did not have these prepared. I just went online and grabbed these sources as I put this document together today, okay? I didn't spend 3 months preparing this. It took me a few minutes. Why? Because my position's true. It's easy for me to find evidence, right? I don't have to go dig and build some complicated case or, go down into the basements of some old libraries. The truth of what I say is all over the internet everywhere in, reputable sources like medical websites, publications of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, publications of the Center for Disease Control. My position is supported by readily available evidence that we could get in a few minutes if we look for it. So I have no need to dig and prepare and go hunt and try to scheme up some kind of evidence. It's very easy to find from prominent websites available to the public. So the first objection was that fruit is healthy, right? This argument that fruit is healthy. Now that argument with respect to orange juice is an example of equivocation, where someone changes the terms or changes the meanings of the terms in the midst of their argument. I would not deny that fruit is healthy. The problem is that orange juice and fruit are not the same thing. All right? The health benefits of fruit do not apply to fruit juice. And I'm going to provide evidence, so relax if you don't agree. The health benefits of fruit are caused by a number of different things in fruit, not just by the juice that's in the fruit. So just because you're consuming the juice doesn't mean that you're getting the benefits that are credited to fruit. So here's a quote, and I've got the sources on this other page, okay? Here's a quote, and this is from, it's one of a few sources. It's either the Center for Disease Control or a publication of Dietary Guidelines for America. These are public documents that are published with sort of the latest and greatest research behind them. So let's see if fruit juice is considered fruit in terms of health, right? At least half of the recommended amount of fruit that you eat should come from whole fruit, not juice. When juices are consumed, they should be 100% juice and always pasteurized, or 100% juice diluted with water and with no added sugars. So even when we're talking about fruit juice, there's not some blanket argument presented to fruit juice that it's all healthy. The only fruit juice that's even considered healthy is 100% fruit juice that's pasteurized, or fruit juice diluted with water with no added sugars, okay? So anyone sitting there chugging a big glass of orange juice that's not necessarily 100% orange juice, isn't pasteurized, or isn't diluted with water, has no claim to any health for that fruit juice. That's not even what's said to be healthy. Moreover, if they're drinking juice and the juice that they drink produces more than half of the fruit that they consume, they're not following health guidelines anyway. So they're not right. The health benefits attributed to fruit are not just attributed to the juice, but to the whole fruit, which includes, the pulp and the fiber of the fruit and so on. So you can't claim the health of fruit on behalf of fruit juice. It's not true. Secondly, another source says, choose whole fruit over fruit drinks and juices. Choose whole fruit over fruit drinks and juices. Fruit juices have lost fiber from the fruit. Okay, so two arguments that show that you can't equate fruit juice with fruit. The health benefits that are attributed to fruit don't automatically apply to fruit juice, all right? And secondly, when we talk about eating fruit, we talk about eating oranges, and I'm obviously running over time here. You can leave if you want, it's okay. It'll be recorded. For most people, it's recommended eating 1 to 2 oranges a day. 1 to 2 oranges a day is safe and healthy. 1 to 2 oranges a day. Do you know how many oranges are required to make an 8-ounce glass of orange juice? 4 oranges, all right? An 8-ounce glass of orange juice requires 4 oranges. So that's either twice as much as the quantity of oranges, or 4 times as much as is recommended for health. So again, you can't claim the health benefits of fruit when you drink orange juice, all right? So that's my objection to that first, or my response to that first objection. Secondly, there is this chemical, aspartame or aspartame, in Diet Coke, okay? Therefore, it's dangerous. No one says that except crazy people. The truth is, you would need to have a certain amount of that chemical in order for it to become dangerous. It's like anything, right? Salt would also be dangerous if you consumed a whole entire box of salt, right? But if you have some salt on your food, it's not unhealthy. But eating, 2 cups of salt would kill you, right? So it's not about a certain substance. Pay attention to me here. It's not about a certain substance, it's about the quantity of a certain substance that actually makes it dangerous. Well, the acceptable daily intake of aspartame or aspartame for a 150-pound person would be 3,400 milligrams a day. So you can safely consume 3,400 milligrams of that substance and still be considered safe. That would take 17 cans of diet soda. So yes, you would be right in arguing that Diet Coke is dangerous if some crazy person was drinking 17 cans of diet soda a day, right? But if less than that, that substance, the level of that substance is not even significant, right? So just arguing that because it has some substance in it, it's therefore unhealthy because scientists have shown that that substance causes cancer, and neglect the amount or the quantity that's needed is just irrational, okay? Because that would mean you can't use salt either. Too much water is bad for you. So obviously that can't be a sound argument. So I would refute or reply to that objection from aspartame or aspartame based on the fact that it's about quantity, not about the substance itself, okay? The same thing is said of caffeine. Well, Coke has caffeine in it, coffee has caffeine, caffeine is dangerous. We don't drink caffeine, caffeine's dangerous. It's the same problem. The Food and Drug Administration says that for healthy adults, 400 milligrams of caffeine a day is considered safe, right? 400 milligrams a day is safe. A can of diet soda has 46 milligrams of caffeine. So you'd have to drink close to 10 cans of soda before your caffeine levels got into any kind of unhealthy territory. That just doesn't happen, all right? So a can of diet soda doesn't have any caffeine danger. A can of diet soda doesn't have any aspartame or aspartame danger. Those can both be refuted with evidence. Fourth, Diet Coke is acidic. It can burn through the paint of a car. Therefore, it's bad for you. Diet Coke is acidic, that's true. But the problem with this argument is that your stomach is more acidic than Diet Coke. Your stomach has gastric acid in it, and the acidity of gastric acid is greater than the acidity of Diet Coke. So you're pouring a liquid, in drinking a Diet Coke, you're pouring a liquid into your stomach that's less acidic than your stomach already is. So that argument makes no sense. All right. Now, if your stomach was like neutral with acidity and you were pouring a soda and your soda had a pH of 3.3, which is how acidity is measured, then you could say that, oh, this is dangerous. We're pouring an acid into our little happy, safe, neutral stomach that doesn't like acid. But that's not true. Your stomach's already filled with acid. That's how you digest food. Okay. Diet Coke is less acidic than your stomach already is, so that argument makes no sense. Plus, it's not like orange juice is not acidic. The pH of orange juice is 4.0. It's almost the same as diet soda. So that argument makes no sense in this discussion. Okay, they're both acidic, but neither of them are more acidic than your stomach acid. And guess what? If you took your stomach acid and squeezed it out into a cup and poured it on the hood of a car, it would eat through the paint. That's what acid does. That's why it's in your body. It's for digestion. So that's a dumb argument, right? That because it's acidic, it's bad for you. Your stomach is acidic, okay? That's an ignorant argument. Then lastly, this argument that Diet Coke is unnatural, right? Diet Coke is unnatural. This again makes no sense. Diet Coke is natural in the same sense that orange juice is. Diet Coke is natural in the same sense that orange juice is. And here's my explanation. A can of soda is produced artificially from substances that exist in the natural world. True or false? A can of soda is produced artificially from substances that exist in the natural world. True or false? Or do they import chemicals from, some other galaxy or universe when they make Diet Coke? Everything in a can of Diet Coke comes from the natural world. It doesn't even make any sense to say that something is not natural. Okay? Doesn't even make sense unless you're literally, traveling outside of the universe or entering into some other sphere of existence. Maybe an angel comes and gives you some substance that's supernatural, and you put that into the Diet Coke. Okay, maybe then I'd grant you the unnatural argument, but everything in Diet Coke is natural. A can of soda is produced artificially from substances that exist in the natural world. The same thing is true of orange juice. A glass of orange juice is produced artificially. A glass of orange juice is produced artificially from substances that exist in the natural world. You don't go into the natural world and find, orange juice flowing through flowing down a stream. You have to go and take a fruit like oranges, squeeze them mechanically to get the juice out of them to get a glass of orange juice. It's an artificial process that takes natural substances and produces a beverage from them artificially. Okay? So I would argue that Diet Coke is natural in the same sense that orange juice is. Arguing that something's not doesn't even make any sense. Everything that exists is natural. Okay? So that's no argument. So those were the four objections that I raised at the beginning. I believe all of them can be easily refuted. And therefore, there's only a need for one positive argument. And again, the argument is valid, and both of the premises are true. And therefore, if the premises are true and the argument is valid, the conclusion has to be true. That's just the basic rule of reasoning. Okay? So I've proven that my thesis is true. Diet Coke is healthier. All right? If you'd like to object to that, you would have to prove that one of those premises is false or that my argument is not valid. And I don't think you can do that. I've already answered the objections that were raised, that I raised at the beginning. And does anyone think that I failed to refute each of these objections? Anyone think that I failed to refute any of these objections? No, I refuted all of them. And my refutation is all sourced. If you look at this other document, I've got all of the sources right here for everything that I said. All the sources, they're scientific sources, universities, scientific publications, government agencies. This isn't, William Michael's opinion of the day from his, quacky medical book that he reads. These are authoritative sources in our society. Every statement is a quote directly from a source. All the sources are provided. So not only do I refute the objections, but I do so with evidence and authoritative evidence. Okay. Now, there were a couple other objections that were raised, but I think they fall under these same problems. Like one of you said, Diet Coke causes obesity. That's impossible, physically impossible that something with 0 calories can cause obesity. So that's impossible, right? And if it was true, the burden of proof would be on you to demonstrate that before I would even need to respond to it. So I just call that baloney. I don't think that can be proven at all, right? It's like saying, again, you're just restating the same argument with no evidence. You can reword it 75 times and you're still just doing the same thing. You're just restating the same position, okay? So you're not proving it, okay? So I don't see any reason to accept that. I have no reason to believe that that's true, and therefore I'm not going to bother to reply to it. The other one was what? That Diet Coke causes your calcium in your bones to, again, I have no way to know that for certain. If you make that assertion, you have to provide positive evidence for it, and I don't have that evidence, so that burden is on you. And the third one, you can get addicted to it. You can get addicted to it, right? So what's the danger? You can get addicted to it. So you're not saying you must get addicted to it. You're saying you can get addicted to it. So that means there must be some other cause, because the Diet Coke itself doesn't cause addiction, or else everyone would get addicted to it, right? You can get addicted means that there must be some other cause outside of the diet soda, right? Like a pre-existing condition that predisposes you to become addicted. Well, that's a different problem, but that's not being caused by the diet soda, all right? And if you, let me just say this. Now, here's another place where you get yourself in trouble. Let's say you're a kid and you like playing video games, and your mother says, I don't want you playing video games because you can get addicted to video games. You're like, oh, come on, mom. I'm not going to get it. And then you turn around and make the same argument against Diet Coke. Well, now your mother pulls a chair up next to this argument and says, go ahead, I'd like to see you make this argument, because as soon as you're finished making this argument, I'm going to flip it around on you and throw your video games in the garbage can, right? Because it came out of your own mouth. So you see, another problem in arguing is self-contradiction, right? Self-contradiction causes another problem, okay? And so what does Socrates do in the dialogues? He leads people to self-contradiction and then flips the whole argument upside down on them, and they're trapped by their own words, okay? So you've got to be careful. Macrina, sugar causes blah, 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 blah. No evidence. I could say sugar causes people to jump over houses. I mean, am I allowed to say that? Okay. George, go ahead. Go ahead, George. I see you say you have an objection against my demonstration. All right, Joshua, take care. George, you say you have an objection. Go ahead. Now, what I hope you see here, remember I said I want this. 1 second, George, I'll answer that. Remember I said what I want you to see is the standard, right? How difficult it is to say anything. It's really difficult to make an assertion and provide some kind of proof to go with that. It's very, very difficult. Most of what we are surrounded by in modern society is just, ignorant information, like hearsay, nonsense. It's very, very difficult to make statements with evidence. And in order to be a so-called educated person or reasonable person, you've got to commit to speak with evidence. It's sort of a moral commitment that you make, that you're not going to say things that you can't prove or that aren't self-evident. That's the difference between like the ignorant mob in the streets that's just crazy and intelligent people. They actually are careful to only say things that are true or can provide evidence for. Okay. George Owens says, can you prove that calories even exist? All right. Well, I would turn this back on you real quick, George, and say, why don't you give us a definition of calories, right? Why don't you give us a definition of calories, or I can pull up a definition of calories. I might have to sign in here. Yeah. Just so you know, this is how you sign into the Oxford Dictionary. Same username and password I use. So a calorie is a unit of heat energy based on the specific heat of water. So it's just a unit of energy. So when you say, can you prove calories exist? Are you asking if I can prove that energy exists? It's just a unit of energy. It's like saying, can you prove that inches exist? What does that even mean, right? Can you prove that miles exist? Yeah. I can prove that inches exist based on the definition, all right? Based on the definition. The username and password for the OED for CLA students is OEDCLAA. Very, very, very complicated password. All right, so George, can I prove that calories are just a unit of measure? Well, let me ask you this, because this is really great. And I'm sorry we're going over here. But let me ask you this. Those of you who have studied mathematics, let's dig into your mathematical studies, right? Those of you who have studied mathematics, how do we measure anything? How do we measure something? Anybody who studies mathematics. So I'm not looking for guesses. How do we measure anything? What do we learn in let's say, classical mathematics? Username's the same. Yes, Macrina. Where do units come from? That's my question. How do we measure something? How do we measure something? You see? So if I wanted to, I could beat you all up with mathematical arguments because you don't know, right? I would say that to measure something, we have to identify a unit of measure. It could be anything we want. It could be, I could use this marker as a unit of measure and then just count how many markers it takes for me to walk from here to the store. I can set any unit of measure. I can use, oh, sorry, Abigail. Maybe that's why people aren't seeing it, because I'm sending all my messages privately to one student. Hold on one second. So that's the website and the username and password. All right. So the argument, do calories exist? Yes, they're just a unit of measure. So then you would have to go deeper and say, oh, so you're saying energy exists? How can you prove energy exists? And you see how this is getting absurd? Like, you might think it's reasonable, but it's like, well, if energy doesn't exist, why are you eating? Now you're getting into ridiculous territory. So why would we even eat? If I can prove that energy exists by saying, here's what you should do. Don't eat until I tell you to eat again, and we'll see if energy exists or not in food, right? When you die, you will be the proof that energy and calories exist. All right. Okay, so that's it. So I presented. Now, you can get into this last section where we just summarize everything, and I summarize it all at the bottom. Okay. But I thought of objections on my own and prepared refutations of them. I prepared one positive argument, and I made sure that it was valid and that the premises were true. Okay. And by the time I'm done presenting that, I think you'll all agree that for all of the puffed up talk over the past week, it's awfully quiet in here in the chat room. It's awfully quiet. I don't see many responses. James Bates is waving the white flag on behalf of your army there. Okay. No. It's no. Now, let me just say this. Don't say it's not that anybody won. It's that at this point, it appears that I won, right? It appears that my thesis is true at this point, but we can keep going. So I saw one of you just said you have an objection. Henry, go ahead. What's your objection? The debate never ends, so no one ever wins, right? It just appears at the present time, it appears that my thesis is standing up to the test, right? It appears that my thesis and my defense of it is standing up to the test. You surrender? Okay. I appreciate that. No, but what I want you to see is that the disputation can continue, because now you've got all these things in your head, and now, you know what, 2 weeks from now, you might say, aha, I figured out what he did, how he tricked us. And you can come up with a refutation. How can I prove a calorie scientifically? Again, George, a calorie is just a unit of measure. That doesn't make any sense. How can I prove an inch scientifically? By its definition. That doesn't make any sense. If you're asking me whether there's energy in food, whether I can prove that there's energy in food, I would just ask you, I mean, imagine how ridiculous it's going to be when I ask you, why do you eat if you don't believe that there's energy in your food, right? Saying what? Give me an example. Does that prove that Diet Coke is healthier? Well, I presented the argument that Diet Coke is healthier based on that syllogism that I gave. Okay. Now, Macrina, you're just adding stuff. You're not responding to what I said. Regular consumption of orange juice has been associated with several. Okay, great. No one ever said that orange juice is not healthy. That wasn't the argument. That's not even the question. And then Bernadette writes, in Diet Coke, the sweeteners used are so-and-so. In addition to the adverse metabolic effects, some worry or all worry? Some people worry. Why do only some worry? I mean, those people might believe there's monsters in the closet, right? Some worry or all worry? If we're talking about scientists, do all the scientists agree, or does some guy who represents no other scientists believe that? Who would say some believe? Okay. All right, Adel, thank you for joining us and persevering this long. Abigail says, orange juice from the store is pasteurized and doesn't have health benefits. Homemade orange juice made with a reamer is just sugar water and doesn't have homemade. So even if we say orange juice is healthy, it doesn't prove it's healthier, which is the actual question. Okay. No one denied that orange juice is in and of itself healthy in as much as it's food, right? Obviously, you can't live without food. Henry has an argument above. I'm sorry, I have to find it here. Okay, I found it, Henry. 2:21 p.m. Henry wrote, wouldn't you need to have an experiment where only Diet Coke or orange juice was consumed because there are so many other factors which could influence obesity and bad health? I would say no, Henry, because the question is just a question of degree. It's whether one is healthier than the other. And even, if you say, well, someone ate 25 hamburgers and then drank some orange juice. Did the orange juice cause his obesity? No, it was the 25 hamburgers, right? But if he could have had a Diet Coke instead of that orange juice, would that have helped reduce his obesity? Yes, it would have. Because it would have been 0 calories instead of 100. He would be less obese than he would with orange juice. Okay. Yeah. So it's bad for kids. What's bad for kids? Diet Coke. Diet Coke is bad for kids. And he's appealing to his own authority for that argument. It's bad for kids. George, if George's question about the calories before, George would want to know if he could prove that kids exist. Right? How can he prove kids exist? Okay. Abigail has just declared herself to be irrational voluntarily. She said, even though Diet Coke won, I still think it's bad. Okay. Even though you're right, I still think you're wrong. That's okay. But you know what that makes you, though, right? That makes you a member of the crazy people. And we've just got Bernadette came prepared. She wore Google out. She's got facts about all kinds of stuff, all kinds of irrelevant facts. She's talking about colors of Coca-Cola. Okay. I'm not going to get into the color argument. That's getting pretty complicated. Is the amount of caffeine in Diet Coke suitable for children? Well, I told you the number that I got was I think, wasn't it 46 milligrams per can, right? 46 milligrams per can. All right. So we went through that. I'm certain, one thing I'm certain of is that my prediction was right, that I think you got surprised by how difficult it is to argue. And that's the point of this exercise. It's not that one side won or didn't win. What I want you to see is the method of disputation and how difficult it is to say things, how difficult it is to prove things that you may think that they're true, or that you may be committed, like Abigail said. You just have this hunch that, Mr. Michael's like tricking us somehow. My wife says that all the time. If I get an argument with my wife, she'll just say, "Oh, I know you're just probably tricking me." She'll accuse me of tricking her somehow in a disagreement. But we've got to figure out how we can prevent people from doing that. If I am tricking you, how, right? That's the challenge. So what I wanted to do with this was just give you an experience of what it's like and how high the standards can be. So a question that seems to be ridiculous can actually be defended very strongly. Got the white flag from James. Go ahead, George. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. George is really he's gonna fight on this existence of calories. George, calories are just a unit of measure. There's nothing to prove. It exists because we give it a name and define it. The question that you'd have to ask is whether energy exists. You're killing this. Yeah, I'm still recording. You're killing this question on calories, but that's not even the question. Hold on a second. I see some questions coming in here. George, if we can't use our senses to see calories, then it's not scientific. That's a good thought, George, but it's not true because we establish names and their definitions, right? We establish names and their definitions. If I decide, like, how can I prove that a microscope is a microscope, right? Is that scientific? Yeah, I say, this is the word that we use, and this is the definition that we use. Now, if you're studying classical reasoning, Aristotle explains that language is established by convention. That means men name things and then establish a definition for that name, and then they agree to use that definition. That's why we have dictionaries. So no, there's nothing natural about a name and its meaning. That's established by convention. So, that's a good point. Okay. But a calorie we know that a calorie exists. It exists as a word, which is a sign of an idea, and it has a definition which identifies the idea that it's a sign of. That gets a little complicated, but we study that in reasoning. Can you see, touch, taste, smell, or hear whatever a calorie is? Again, that's like saying, can you taste, touch, smell, or hear, the word microscope, right? Obviously, I can see the word calorie. You just typed it on the screen. I can see calorie. C-A-L-O-R-I-E. Calorie. If it didn't exist, how could you even use the word? You might as well write, jiggy jaggy and say, does jiggy jaggy exist? That would be a better question. I wouldn't know if jiggy jaggy exists, but I'm pretty confident calorie exists. Gianna's got some facts. She's got, you guys have the facts machine guns out here, but they're irrelevant. I explained to you that your job is very simple. I gave you a syllogism, And you have two very simple things to do. Prove that one of my premises are false, or prove that the conclusion doesn't come from the premises. Just firing away with 100 other, it doesn't address the problem you're in. Now you're going to blame. I told you, James. I told you they were puffing you up the other day just because they were going to use you as a sacrificial lamb at the end. I told you that, and now you're seeing it happen. They're throwing you under the bus. You failed us, James. Yep, I warned you. Now you know the real nature of your team members. You should come to the dark side and join me. Now that they've shown their character. Abigail doesn't even care if it's true. She says she rejects it anyway. So George, you're ultimately arguing the nature of language, which you see how when you study classical reasoning, I don't know if you've got into Aristotle at all yet, but Aristotle starts talking about the use of words and language, and everyone who starts reasoning is like, why is he talking about language and words and all this boring stuff? Because that's what this comes down to, right? Your questions are a perfect example of why the first book of reasoning, the category, starts by talking about words. Most students, if you challenge them, they wouldn't even know what words are. They just, we don't think about it. That's part of the problem. Both Diet Coke, Diet Coke can't cause. Well, I'll give you this. Let me give you an argument. If you were a little sharper, you could say something like this: if a man weighs 100 pounds, 0 ounces, and he drinks 8 ounces of Diet Coke, he gains 8 ounces. Therefore, it causes weight gain, right? So you can make that argument. That would be true. That would have been really clever, but none of you thought of it, so you can't take credit. And the fact that I've got to come up with arguments for you is pretty pathetic, It's like I've got to go bat for your team because none of you can hit the ball. So I actually go bat for your team, score some runs for you guys, and then you guys are going to brag about the score, right? All I just saw was, then I thought of urine. I think I missed your first statement. Oh, you're talking about gaining 8 ounces of weight from drinking, yeah. Okay. So I really don't, Bernadette's, she's just still firing away. She's like, she's just firing her last bullets here. Fruit juice is rich in vitamins. Yeah. So what, Bernadette? That's irrelevant. Is Diet Coke cheap? Well, if you get the Walmart brand, it is. If it is proven that is so. All right. I think we're done. I'm sorry to say it. I know you're scurrying around looking for a silver bullet someplace, but I think all your shots have been fired. I don't think you're going to. But again, it's not about winning, right? It's about coming up with objections, me refuting those objections, and then you questioning whether, if I refute one of your objections and you say, no, that doesn't refute it, and you have a reason to reject my refutation, object to the refutation, that keeps the discussion going, right? You may think of some other objections. You may catch me doing something that goes against the rules of reasoning. I don't think you're skillful enough to catch that yet, though. So I think, I hate to admit it, but we've come to the end, and I think you guys lost. I think the Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice argument appears to have won again. It appears to have won again. All right. You're right, George. I said there's no losing, right? And that's one of the things you've got to understand when you get into discussions. Just because I might look impressive today that doesn't mean that I'm actually right. We have to keep digging, keep thinking, keep trying to invent arguments, come up with objections, and so on. But what I think you got a good taste of today is the standard that you're going to have to think with. It's very, very difficult, right? Very difficult. Bernadette's method, the machine gun method, didn't do anything. Trusting in some, savior, like you guys all like put all your hopes in James and he just waved the white flag on your side. That's not going to help you. George tried to get into language issues that he wasn't prepared for. All right. So this is also an advertisement for the study of classical reasoning, I hope. I hope that you join me in studying classical reasoning. We'll talk about these things, but let me just say this. What we did today is what you learned in the first lesson in classical logic about, or one of the first lessons about the syllogism. You saw a good example today of a syllogism and how a syllogism is like bulletproof, right? A good syllogism is bulletproof. That's the whole point of syllogisms. That's what Aristotle discovered and what he teaches in the Rhetoric, okay? I see Ava saying I didn't refute her argument. And let me just finish your word for you there, argument. You didn't refute. What argument did I not, I didn't quietly pass over it. This is what people do on social media. There'll be like 700 posts and you don't respond to theirs and they say like, afraid, huh? Running for your life, huh? Trying to hide on me, eh? Like, no, I missed it. There's 700 posts here. What was your argument? The last argument I saw from you, Ava, was that it's bad for kids and you present that on the authority of your father, which for you, by the way, you have to obey. So now, if, again, you're going to trap yourself in your own argument, right? You're like, hey, we must obey my father. Okay. Your dad's videotaping this in the background right now, and he's going to show it to you every day for the rest of your life. Remember that day? Remember that day? Here's your own words. I'm going to play it back for you. So that was a very well played move by your father to get you to fall for that one. Caffeine isn't recommended for kids. Sure, it's not, but it still doesn't address the problem. Anything else here? I should be a voice actor. Well, no, you know what it is that I've spent so much time talking to crazy people that I can imitate them pretty well. It's just experience. One last question. Go ahead. If anything causes you to gain weight, then how is Diet Coke healthier? When I say, well, you see what you could have done here, what you could have done is none of you ever at any point, this is one of the faults that you felt that you made. None of you required me to define anything at any point. Anything I said, I was never asked to provide a definition, right? That's your fault. I was never required to define anything. So you couldn't hold me to any definitions of any terms. So even like the phrase gain weight, right? What does that mean? I just explained that if you drink a can of soda, obviously you gain weight, right? You gain 8 ounces. So what do we mean by gain weight? That would have been a good question, but unfortunately you didn't think of it. So too late. That's another lesson you need to learn. When someone uses a word in an argument, stop them, make them define it. And then once they've defined it, hold them to that definition every time they use that word from that point on. That's your responsibility. You didn't do it, so I was free to roam. Hint, hint. Is Diet Coke healthier for adults than for kids? Maybe, yeah. Well, kids are obese nowadays too because they eat just as bad as adults do. Look up the price of ice cream as opposed to, so you're going to make the price argument. So that which is what? More expensive is healthy? Is that the argument? So gold, eating gold is healthier than salad? That's an interesting argument. I would like you to conduct that experiment and share with us the video results of you consuming some gold. See how that goes. George, you're still hammering on calories. Calories is just a word. It's just the name of a unit of measure. There's nothing to prove. I think James left. I think James threw the white flag over the wall and took off. Link to the doc. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that today. Let me give you a link. But the important thing, again, the important thing is I want you to learn how to do what I did today, okay? You can't use random words, George, when someone is going to require you to define your terms and then hold you accountable to them. I don't think Moses fed anybody gold. How you define healthy, that's a good question. And I prepared an answer right here. Let me give it to you. Healthy definition. I was hoping that one of you would ask that. No one asked that question the whole entire time. No one asked what the word healthy even means. I had the definition prepared for you. This is from the Oxford Dictionary. Healthy means possessing or enjoying good health, sound in body so as to be able to discharge all functions efficiently. Okay. No, I'm not unmuting you. See, you gotta use the weapons that are available to you. Calorie is a random word. No, calorie is not a random word. Calorie is a commonly used word with an established definition, as I can prove by showing you the dictionary. All right, Ava, you wanna open mic, Ava? Okay, go ahead.
Moses fed the Israelites gold from their golden calf at Mount Sinai when he taught them commandments, and they were fine.
Okay, so your argument here is that we should eat like the idol worshippers that Moses.
No,
I think wasn't that a punishment? I mean, that was a punishment, right? Like when King Croesus, or who was it? Was it Midas? King Midas, was he the one? I forget. I think it was Croesus in.
It was Midas.
No, I think the one who was actually made to drink molten gold. I think that was King Croesus. He's a Persian king who when he was captured and punished, they poured molten gold down his throat. So I think that would be considered a punishment. I don't see, now here's the thing. I don't think I would want to present the idol worshippers punished by Moses as my teammates in the debate, right? So that would be the problem there. Yeah, that would be a horrible way to die. Because he was such a greedy king. I believe he was captured and they poured molten gold down his throat. They were pretty good at coming up with ways to die back in those days. Pretty brutal people. All right. So anyway, I think that was a good experience for you. Again, the Diet Coke orange juice debate goes on. It's been going for I don't even know, 2006. That's like 17 years. I've talked about this with students. It's always the same issues. One of the main issues is they don't ask for definitions of terms. Once I see that a person now, I'm not saying I would do this because you have to be honest, but once a person sees that the other person is not going to require definitions, you're dead. You're dead. Argument's over, because a deceitful person, a clever person, when he sees you're not going to watch words carefully, you're dead. Okay, I'm not interested in talking about the golden calf anymore, or Croesus, or brutal execution methods. What's Macrina's argument? I didn't see it. What's an argument? All of you are telling me you've got all these great arguments. I'm going through every one that I see. So just repost it. It's a lot easier for you to repost it than for me to go find it, you know, in this haystack of craziness here. If you want to use the mic, let me know, because we've got a smaller group now. I can open your mic if you want to talk. You cannot use the word health when defining healthy. That's a good argument. All right, so let's look at this. Possessing or enjoying good health. That's only part of the definition. So I could just present the second part. Sound in body so as to be able to discharge all functions efficiently. That would be a good definition. I wouldn't have to assume the meaning of health in that definition. Okay. Now, if I were to present another argument on another day, I would hope that you were a little better at knowing what to watch for. That's part of the point of this. And I'll just tell you this. This is how people are deceived in real life. This is how deception happens. I'm not deceiving anybody here. But what I'm saying is, this is how deception happens. I could take an argument that's actually false and immoral or evil. And if you're not going to ask me to define terms and you don't know how to watch for false arguments, you're in trouble. If anything, I didn't say anything causes you to gain weight, so I don't know why you keep saying that. Can we please argue this at the end of the year? Yeah, we can argue this every week if you want to. Listen, if you come up with an idea that you think is a good objection or a refutation, just let me know when we have this meeting on Fridays, and you can do your best. Take another swing at it. James needs to make at least one argument. Yeah, I would agree. I thought you said one more, but I was going to say at least one, period. But let me just tell you, the fact that some of you have proposed many arguments is not necessarily a good thing, because you've presented many bad arguments, okay? So James has a total of 0 bad arguments, and he's also got 0 good arguments, but some of you have 0 good arguments and 11 or 12 bad arguments. You don't get any points for bad arguments. In fact, we'd have to make a rule like you lose points for bad arguments. We'd have to give out negative points. So James would still be winning. He probably still, actually, he might be your leader, actually, after you get done with all your bad arguments. He might be the leader. I didn't give an argument. Yes, you did, Zuri. I saw something you posted at one point, Zuriana. I remember you posted something early on. You still haven't answered my question. Lara, I've tried to understand your question, but I don't know what you're asking about gaining. I told you that the meaning of gain weight. I don't mean gain water weight from drinking the actual soda and having it go into your stomach. That's not what I mean. When we talk about gaining weight, we talk about what's called the net effect of, consuming more calories than you, taking in, I should say, more calories than you burn, right? And the weight actually remains with you after you eat and exercise. Diet Coke prevents greater health risks because in no way can it contribute to obesity, where orange juice can. In fact, one of the things, if you look at recommendations for how to lose weight, they'll tell you to stay away from sugary soft drinks and fruit juices. Okay. All right. Now you see what you're doing here. This is what's funny. This is what my students always used to do. They could never get enough of this debate. But the challenge is for you to come up with a question, right? I mean, I know I can do this. I've been doing it for a million years, but the challenge is for you to come up with controversial questions and basically prepare a response like I did. Yours won't be as good just because it takes time. You need experience, but they'll get better. I've been doing this for a long time. Don't expect that yours is going to feel or look like mine did. It's going to be sketchy and much weaker, but you just need to work on it. You need to get better at it by doing it. Okay. How do we know Coke Zero? Well, those kinds of questions, like how do we know that this drink has 0 calories? We can go and find scientific evidence for that because it's measured. It can be measured. I can probably find evidence in a minute. Proof that Diet Coke has 0 calories. So I could dig through science journals and probably find a place where someone actually conducted an experiment and tested for calories. What I think they would do, and I'm not a scientist, obviously, but I did study some science. I think what they would do is they would remove all of the water from the drink, so it's just the solid content that's left. And then they have a device where they basically set the solid matter on fire inside of a box that measures energy, and then they can measure the heat that's given off by the solid, and the amount of energy that's given off would be considered the measure of the calories that were present in the food. I mean, in a rough sense, I think that's how it's done. I don't know the details of it. If you're going to argue that a beverage with no calories is not healthy, then you're going to be stuck with water, right? Water has no calories. So that's not going to help you. That argument would, take water off the menu. So if you're ready to yield water, I'll yield Diet Coke. But remember what I said. I want you to prepare some arguments, come up with some controversial questions. They could be any topic you want. It doesn't have to be something that's like complicated. It could be something simple that you're interested in, It could be something controversial that you're interested in. How often do you drink Diet Coke? See now what James is doing here? He's going after personal attacks. You see what he's doing? He's going to try to attack me personally. Normally, I might have one a day. Sometimes I have one Diet Coke. So I'm healthy. 46 milligrams of caffeine, 0 calories. But I also exercise, so I don't credit my health to like the chemicals I pour in my body. Laura, the no calorie argument is the same for water, so it doesn't make any sense, right? It's like arguing that water is not important because it has no calories. That's not going to work. OJ helps you get better. That's just another bullet, Bernadette. No evidence helps you get better. Why are you sick in the first place? Probably because you're not drinking Diet Coke. That's probably why. That's why you're sick to begin with. Walking around all sick, drinking orange juice. And then when you get sick, you drink more orange juice and say it made you better. What kind of crazy argument is that? There are chemicals. You're going to start the chemicals argument. Let me ask you, George, do chemicals exist? Do chemicals exist? I get headaches a lot. Maybe I should try Diet Coke. Yeah, maybe you should stop giving out health advice when you're the sick one in the crowd. Yeah, most of the people who argue with me about health are always sick. I'm never sick. So like, maybe you should listen. Maybe I'm right. I'm probably never sick because Diet Coke kills all the bacteria in my stomach and keeps me, it's probably so poisonous that it actually kills all of the germs. I use Diet Coke on the farm to kill weeds. Just spray it all over everything. You go to the butcher and you find out he kills the animals by just making them drink Diet Coke. Okay, Macrina's fine. She's got more rockets here. Let's see. All 100% juices have higher nutrient. It doesn't matter. That's not the issue. No one's talking about sugary soda. You're just wasting all this ammo, shooting bullets all over the place. No one's talking about sugary soda. You're talking about stuff that you can't even pronounce here. You don't even know what these words are. Carotenoids, is that more certain? Now we're getting into like easier to understand territory by talking about carotenoids and polyphenols and flavonoids. You don't even know what those things are. I've been sick for a week. That's why online classes are so good. Because when someone's sick, they just die alone. It's not like a modern school where the whole school dies, right? We just watch individual student be sick all the time and we're all safe. Now, I didn't recommend that anyone drink Diet Coke, did I? I never said anyone should drink Diet Coke. That wasn't the argument. The argument was that it's healthier than orange juice. That's all. Didn't make any recommendations. Zoriana, maybe you can argue that Diet Coke is healthier than orange juice, but I can argue that water is healthier than Diet Coke. Maybe, but that's irrelevant. So doesn't matter. You're probably right, Zoriana. You probably could make an argument. You're probably right. You probably could argue that water is healthier than Diet Coke, which I think everybody tells you anyway. Wish we could talk about water. Talk about what? This is proof that I'm an effective teacher, that I've got teenagers who are begging for permission to talk about water. What do you want to talk about? Orange juice is thirst quenching. Coke makes you more thirsty. That would have to be proven, which leads to addiction. Like right away, you've got everybody succumbing to addictions. Like you walk by a can of Coke and you're like just overwhelmed by it and trapped. You're going to have to get into this question of addiction. What if I said there's no such thing as addiction? What if I said it's just an excuse to continue in a bad habit? If addiction is this is how you get into other topics too that are worth debating. If addiction is true, that a person is addicted, then they can't be guilty of that. Aristotle wouldn't agree. Artificial, but Bernadette, you're just firing more bullets with no proof. How is it better than any other soft drink? Gonna disconnect and reconnect. Yeah. Now, Macrina now is just judging. She's saying, I would say you're wrong. I say you're wrong. Like she's suddenly become the king. She's just issuing judgments on arguments. You don't have that power, Macrina. You're not allowed to just declare things true and false. What if I said calories aren't real? You'd be crazy. That's what. That's all. The definition of addiction. Did you write a definition of addiction? The chat goes too fast. The definition of addiction. I would argue that addiction is just a bad habit. Nobody says like, I'm addicted to doing my schoolwork, right? It just means you have a good habit. We say it about bad habits, and it seems to justify the people who do it, like they're poor victims. Are they poor victims? That'd be a good debate topic. George, I'm not declaring anything to be true by my own authority. Come on. This is going to turn into Facebook here. I presented all my arguments, 2 pages of quotes and sources, which I'll post here. Multiple pages of quotes from authoritative sources. I even have the nutritional information on both orange juice and Diet Coke on that second document. I didn't rely on any opinion. You would argue that calories aren't real. I never said calories aren't real. I'm sorry you got trapped by that question about calories. As for atoms, if you say that atoms actually exist outside the mind as physical objects, and I ask you for proof of that, you would not be able to give me any. So if I say atoms don't exist, I'm not saying the word atom doesn't exist. I'm saying the actual thing that you're referring to. I'm saying that you don't have the ability to prove that it exists. All right, Elise, thank you. We'll see you later. I like when Elise shows up and says, what did I miss? Like we have any idea. How can I explain what you missed? It is used sometimes as a, that is not how you spell that word. I'm 48 years old and I have never seen that word in any English writing in my life. I have an idea what you're trying to say. You guys have to work on spelling though. My atom argument does not apply to calories. You're not thinking about what I've said. First of all, you're the one asking if calories exist. I said a calorie, the difference between a calorie and an atom is the name of an object. A calorie is a name of a unit of measure. Now, what's really cool about this, George, I hope you're paying attention, because what you're sort of digging into an important issue. What you're doing is you're running into trouble because calorie is a quantity, atom is a substance. So you're seeing now you're getting into this where, why does Aristotle start the art of reasoning by talking about the categories? Well, guess what? This question you're asking is about categories of things. So you're kind of digging into an issue that's actually more complicated than you realize. The name calorie is the name that signifies a quantity. The name atom is a name that signifies a substance. That's the difference. That's a very interesting thing. So we see as we get into these debates, we just sort of run into Aristotle. One isn't a real thing. I didn't say that either of them is not a real thing. The atom, if you assert that a substance exists, that means it exists outside the mind, in the natural world somewhere. You would have to demonstrate that, or else you'd have no right to say it. But calorie is just a unit of measure. It's a quantity, and we can make up our own units of measure. So it's not possible for it to exist of itself outside the mind. It's not a substance. Like I said, that discussion, George, you're getting into a complicated discussion, which is pretty cool. But I think what you're gonna, if you haven't already started studying classical reasoning, you've got to get into Aristotle's categories, because that's what it's about. You realize we can't just talk about things without identifying different kinds of things. How can calories affect health? They're not a measure of health, they're a measure of energy in a food. A calorie is a unit of energy. We could make up others if we wanted to. We could use horsepower, for example, right? We could say how much horsepower is in a piece of bread, but the problem is it would be like a tiny, tiny number. It wouldn't be convenient. So we make a unit of measure. We establish a unit of measure that makes more sense. It's not health. It's got to do with energy, because if you consume energy and you consume more energy than you burn, your body stores energy, and that's what fat is. Obesity is a condition where a person has stored thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of calories. It's like having batteries, like electrical batteries. And you put a battery in the remote control and then you use it, and then you just put another one in and another one, and you've got like 500 batteries in the remote control. That's an obese remote control, right? Or gas, like you just go to the gas station every day because it's gas time, and you didn't even drive the car, but you just put another 20 gallons of gas in, and the gas is like filling the back seat and the trunk, and it's just like, oh, 1 o'clock gas time, go back to the gas. You just keep pumping gas into it. That's an obese car. A small amount of orange juice. Here we go. So George, a small amount of orange juice is better because you can use the energy. Now, yeah, you can say a small amount of orange juice. This might be a good line of argument. There's a certain amount of orange juice that would be better than Diet Coke. The problem is that the person who struggles with obesity, guess what they struggle with? They struggle with that whole small amount thing. And they're going to drink 6 gallons of it. They're not going to be content with like 1 shot glass of orange juice. They're not going to do that. The energy is necessary, but we start with a healthy person. Yeah, we start with a healthy person, right? But you're starting to waver from the original question, which is healthier, right? I didn't make any absolute statement about whether orange juice or Diet Coke is healthy by itself. It's a question of degree. Well, gluttony, James, gluttony is one of the causes of the greatest health risks in our society, because food is affordable. You don't have to work for it. You can sit at your computer like me. I sit at a desk all day. My body probably uses like 11 calories a day, unless I go exercise. I could eat like a piece of popcorn and probably have enough energy for a day at my desk. But that wouldn't be healthy. So I've got to artificially exercise because my way of life is not natural for my physical body. So there's more to health than just not gaining weight. The only reason I would never be obese is because my wife would never let me. We all go for walk. I walk so I don't turn into a vampire. A healthy person will be better off with a small amount of orange juice than with a small amount of Diet Coke. Well, I mean, that's a possible argument, but that would be for you to prove. And again, we're dealing with obesity as a risk factor. If people would accept the smaller quantity part, they wouldn't have the problem in the first place. Could I answer Bernadette's argument? What is Bernadette's argument? Oh, here we go. Okay. You know what's helpful? If you tell me the time, you see how it's got like the time next to your comment? If you tell me the time, that helps me find it. By your definition, to do things effectively, Diet Coke is just as good as OJ because they can both discharge functions effectively. No, that's not what it says. Now, what you did there is called word salad. You just kind of threw a bunch of words together that doesn't really mean anything. This is what students do a lot when they answer assignment questions. It looks impressive, but it doesn't really mean anything. The definition of healthy meant that the body is capable of performing its functions. So, for example, if a man is a carpenter and he has to do carpentry work every day to earn his living, health for that man is the ability to do that work. That's what health means. If I'm an academic person, I don't need to climb a ladder and carry wood around and, do all the physical work of a carpenter. So the ability to do that work isn't the definition of health for me, right? So health is relative. My sons are in the military. For them to perform their duties or functions in the military requires great health, that I don't have to have. As long as I can, as long as my brain is connected to my fingers, I'm good for the day. That's my health. I can discharge my functions. I need a brain and fingers, and I can earn a living. Maybe a voice. So health, again, that definition of health is relative. Different people would have different definitions of health based on their functions. Do you believe that Coke is healthy? I'm not talking about Coke. Possessing, sound body so as to be able to discharge all functions efficiently, right? So like if your body is not allowed to breathe, you're not healthy, right? I mean, it shouldn't take a scientist to tell you that. If you can't breathe, you're not healthy. If you can't digest food, you're not healthy. If you have a condition that prevents you from walking, that would be considered not healthy with that definition. I have nothing to say about Coke Zero. It's irrelevant. That's called a distraction in argument. Why would I be willing to enter into other topics where I might not be prepared? I don't see any other arguments here. We're talking about Coke. No, you're talking about Coke. I'm not talking about Coke. And that's part of the problem. You're talking about Coke. You can continue that, but it's irrelevant. And besides, Macrina, your question, do you believe Coke Zero is good for you? That's an irrational question because the health of something is not a matter of faith, right? We don't go to mass on Sunday and say, I believe, and we start listing all kinds of scientific facts, right? I believe that dinosaurs had 3 horns. I believe that grass is green. That's not faith. So you need to learn to rephrase those questions. It's not a matter of believing. You would just say, is Coke Zero healthy for you, period, or question mark in that case. Who cares if I believe it? What kind of a wacko would be talking about what he believes that things are healthy? No, a small amount of orange juice, based on my experience, would not quench my thirst. Large containers of orange juice failed to quench my thirst, which is the problem, right? Water would quench your thirst. If you're drinking orange juice, you're not trying to quench your thirst. You want the sugary orange juice. If you're just thirsty, I've never heard of anybody being rescued in the desert with orange juice. You know? Skiers trapped on a mountain, the St. Bernard shows up with orange juice. No, that's not, I've never heard that one before. Usually alcohol. It's just it's literally a candy, orange juice. That's why people drink it. You can be honest. You don't have to pretend you're virtuous when you want a glass of orange juice. It's just good. Everybody knows that. If your mother offers you water or orange juice, you all choose orange juice. And if you say you don't just because you're a little weird. I like this quote, George. That is what the website said. I can make a website in about 3 minutes. Give me a few minutes. I'll make you a website, say all kinds of stuff. You can just say, oh, that's a website. That could be James's website, you know? He might be quoting James's website. You guys go make websites and then quote them in arguments. So anyway, I hope that was a helpful exercise today. I'd like you guys to do it yourself, and you're going to stink at it when you first try. You're not going to do it well, but you have to start just doing it. It's an exercise you have to do. You have to be willing to, this is why humility is necessary. You've got to be willing to do things and learn to do things where you make a fool of yourself the first few times, but that's how you actually learn to do them. And the people who are prideful and refuse to take that risk, they don't learn. You have to overcome that. So I'd like you guys to think of arguments you might try. Just contact me privately if you want to talk about them. And, I'll make sure you're sort of on the right track. I'm not going to tell you what to say because I want you to have to wrestle with it, but I want you to take some risks. You have nothing to lose, really. In your life, when you're old, in real life, you may have a lot to lose by an argument. You may lose an argument and lose a job, or lose an argument and lose a friend. Get yourself thrown out of the church for losing an argument. But, in debates, in academic debates, you've got nothing to lose. You can take some risks and learn from them. That's what school's for. It's like fake life. Can you give us some clear ideas for topics? Well, two things. They have to be controversial questions. And second, they have to be things you're interested in, because you won't have anything to say. Unlike, for example, I live on a farm. If you don't live on a farm and you try to make an argument about farming, it's just going to be ridiculous because you don't even know what you're talking about, So it's got to be stuff you're interested in. And there's nothing that makes a good or bad topic. If you're interested in sports, it could be about sports. If you're interested in piano or video games or anything, your best arguments are going to come from topics that you're interested in, about, you think about, you have experience with. That's where your arguments need to come from. Now, if you're embarrassed by your experiences, well, that's a reason why it's good to pursue better culture. When you say, well, the only thing I know about is Mickey Mouse, well, that's why it's good to get some better books in the house, Most topics others wouldn't know. That's because you live in England, right? That's because you live in England. And everything is backwards there. You're on the wrong side of the road. You don't know how to speak the language correctly. Give me an example. What's something you're thinking of? Like for example, controversial issues. And I'm just teasing about England. Controversial issues, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying because other students live in America and you're in England, maybe some issues that you would raise, they wouldn't understand. Is that what you're saying? that what you mean? I would actually say the opposite. I would say that you actually have lots of topics you could make, controversial topics, by comparing things. Like you could say, like, something in England is better than in America, right? And you could actually present arguments that students here don't necessarily know about. Yeah, favorite. Yeah, so you could argue possibly that they're better, right? Like, English football is better than American football. English food is better than American food. That you're definitely not going to win that one, but you could try. So for you, George, that could actually be an advantage because you can think of lots of controversial arguments by comparing things. And you'd have an advantage because you could come up with arguments and information that other people wouldn't know. It would actually help you. Okay, so that could be a helpful source of arguments. And it'd be interesting too. You'd definitely have interest in an American audience because you'd be able to talk about things they don't know about. That's one of the things that makes experiences interesting. We learn about that in English composition. What's funny about America, though, we may all be in one country, but the places we live are totally different. Like I'm in North Carolina. It's warm. The weather's beautiful. The Hazelbarth's up there. They're in Pennsylvania. James is in New Hampshire. Zoriana, where are you? Connecticut? Are you in Connecticut? Yeah. The Cloutiers are here in North Carolina. I don't know where I think the Varellas are like in central United States, out in the Midwest somewhere. So we live in the same country, but it's like completely different places. We even have different governments, like state governments are different from one state to the next. It's not just one place. 319. Looking here. 319. There's like 500. There is no 319. 318. With your definition of healthy, you could put any two foods there and it would have a true conclusion. Yeah, but the problem is you're still talking about healthy. I'm talking about healthier. Healthier. You're stuck. You're stuck in grammar of adjectives, on positive adjectives rather than comparative adjectives. The argument was comparative. We live in the granite state. See, James, nobody even knows what the granite state is. That's my point. Nobody walks around talking about the granite state. All right, Bernadette. Thank you for all of the arguments. A funny fact I just learned recently, George, there are 340 million people in America. You know how many people live in the whole European Union? Take a guess. There are 400 million people in the European Union. There's 340 million people in America. I think there's like 80 million in the UK. So when we talk about these things, it's like America is not like Germany or Poland, or it's like the whole European Union, except the states are like countries. Like California is bigger than most European countries. It's just one of our states. I think California has the 5th largest economy in the whole world among countries. So the governor of California is like the leader of the 5th largest government in the world. What's your definition of healthy? I already gave the definition of healthy. Yeah, England's like Hawaii. That was one of the arguments for the colonists in America One of the reasons why they declared independence was because they said it's ridiculous that a whole continent should be governed by an island. That was one of the arguments. There's a work called Common Sense by Thomas Paine. It was written in 1776. That was one of his arguments why they should break away from England. Made no sense for an island to govern a whole continent. The 8 continents of the world. Is that how the English think of England? They think of it as the 8th continent. And you probably make your own maps and you blow it up so it's like bigger than Africa. London is like the center of the universe. You show like the sun orbiting around London. Or whatever town your favorite football team's in, Manchester, Liverpool. Yeah, I know grading. I told you about grading. I'm starting grading as soon as we're done here today, and I'm spending the whole weekend grading. Don't worry. I'll get to it. Carlisle, that's where you guys are at, Carlisle. I have a lot, not really. It takes just minutes to grade. The problem is that I have about 600 assignments to grade. So we're talking a couple days of work, not like 5 minutes. You live, and that's pronounced Leicester, right? Because you just like ignore letters in your words. We would say like Leicester, but it's like Leicester. Yeah. You just write them just to, it's just so schoolmasters can torment children. It's 2 syllables and it's 57 letters. All right, Bernadette, take care. I'll get everything graded this weekend. Don't worry. It's all that I'm doing. Sitting here for 3 days grading assignments. That's my reward for finishing my own academic work. I get to grade papers. Going away in December. Well, we won't be from the 19th of November to the 2nd of December. Okay, well, I mean, fortunately, remember all these meetings are recorded anyway, so you can always catch them if you want to, but that's fine. We'll have a couple weeks. We're going to be closed for Thanksgiving here in America, so Thanksgiving weekend will be closed anyway, so you won't miss too much. All right, any other points before we get going? That was a good exercise. I hope it's helpful. I hope it gets your brains turning. Think about topics you'd like to argue. And I can promise you one thing. I promise you that if you make the effort to do these exercises, I'll help you. But I'm going to force students to take the first step. You've got to be willing to do it. If you're willing to step out and take the risk, I'll help you, but I'm going to make you step first, because eventually if you want a reference letter or something from me, what I want to write is that this student takes initiative and study. And the only way I can write that is if I make you do that. So have some guts, try your best. I promise I'll help you. You'll lose often, but every time you lose, you'll get stronger and eventually you'll stop losing. So that was good. All right. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, I'll post this video, just so you know. I'll post this video and I'll put links to the document. So if you want to see the document, you can get it. But I hope that was helpful. Which language is the most efficient? I think English. If you practice speaking with an English accent, it's actually more efficient. I think that's why they talk like that. That's why they sound better when they sing, and their poetry sounds so good, because they just euphony is better for the English. American is so clunky with our ugly R's and stuff like that. It's very ugly. And when I read to myself, I find myself slipping into a British accent, so it sounds better. I would never do it publicly, but I have to admit I'm a secret English reader. I mean, how can you read Shakespeare with an American accent? It would sound ridiculous, like Shakespeare in Ohio. It'd sound terrible. You have to read with English accent. That's why even in America, George, you might not know this, but anytime that someone wants to make a serious movie in America, they get a British narrator, because that like automatically makes the movie feel serious. Get some old gruff Englishmen, and it's like, whoa, this is a serious movie. It's got an English narrator. It does sound cheesy. It's embarrassing. I grew up in New Jersey. I have a very strong New Jersey accent. I cover it a lot because I've learned to cover it. But when I was a kid, I had like a Staten Island, New Jersey, New York accent. It was pretty terrible. Well, the problem with English, George, is that there's like 100 different dialects, right? Like every different place has a different sound. Some of them you can't even understand. Yeah. But in America, you know, if you want to buy a good audiobook, you find an audiobook that has an English reader. It just makes it sound smarter. You can't have like a person from South Carolina reading some serious book. It sounds ridiculous. So you're automatically assumed to be smart just by talking with an English accent. You could probably trick a lot of American people. Be like a tutor, like an online tutor, have a British accent. They would all think you're smart just because you sound like a movie narrator. I can't imagine what American sounds like to English speakers. It must sound ridiculous. But anyway. Yeah, don't pick up an American accent. Make sure you keep practicing and stick to your English accent if you want any kind of career in academic work, because it just makes you sound smarter from the beginning. You know, I'm sure your father's homilies probably sound much smarter to Americans just because it's an English accent. Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, well, this is a good homily here. Why? I don't know. It just sounds really serious and smart. It's English. That's true. I'm biased. Yeah, Americans, like Southern drawl. If you ever hear of Southerners talk, it's terrible. New Yorkers, Californians, they've all got different dialects. All right, so let's wrap up here today. Take a shot at one of these responses one of these weeks. It may take you weeks to work on it, but like I said, don't be afraid. I'll help those who take a chance, and you'll get better at it. It just takes some practice, and it'll help you with your essay writing. It'll help you with thinking, help you solve problems in your own life. Really helpful stuff. So let's call it a day today, and I'm going to get to grading for the weekend, and I'll catch you guys on Monday, okay? So thanks for joining me. Go ahead. What's your question? You said, wait, do we get second chances? Yeah, it's always just ongoing, you know, like assignments. These things are always ongoing, okay? Always ongoing. You're welcome, Hazel Barth. Thanks for hanging around. All right, so we'll wrap up here and give it a try. I'll help you. If you want to run it by me first, so you don't have to do it in front of everybody first, that's fine. But you can do 100 topics. I don't care. You can do it every week. If nobody else volunteers, tough luck for them, right? We'll just let whoever wants to do it. Okay. So I'll catch you guys on Monday. Try to get all your assignments graded this weekend. Take care, everybody. Okay. Take care. Thanks.